Hey guys, so now that we kind of have everything set up, let's start making some materials. Now the main goal for this thing is we are trying to match reference, so we're just not coming up with this completely from scratch. So I'm going to scroll through here. We have a reference folder already kind of set up on Google Photos with a lot of really good images we can use. This is all in the documentation, so make sure you do check that out. But inside of here, you can kind of see the book and the target we're going to try to hit here. And there is quite a bit of detail, multiple different types of materials on it. Leather, like a fabric, some kind of gold trim in certain areas. The leather is partially torn. Of course, we also have like the pages from the side. So we're going to kind of use this as a guide as we begin building our presets, and we'll see how close we can get. So we'll come back to this. But we want to figure out which material we want to start with. And to me, I think the really obvious one would be to begin with the leather and then add details on top of that. So back inside of Painter, rather than trying to paint something from scratch, like maybe we would in Photoshop, or find a photo of leather, we want to start with a material preset and see how much we can get with just the preset. So if I click on the materials on the shelf, you see we have quite a few different ones here, but let's try to make this a little easier for us. We're going to go to the search bar and type in leather. And you'll notice that we do have quite a few different types of materials that could potentially work. And if you put your mouse over them, eventually they will load a little preset. And let's just kind of drag a couple in here and see what they look like. So I want to drag this up to the layers like this. Okay? And you'll see immediately, as soon as we do that, we already see this leather material on the book. Now, if I want to move the light across the surface, because it might be nice to see how it reflects, if you hold down Shift and right-click, dragging is going to rotate the environment map, which is really nice. Okay, so not bad. Fairly simple, very dark, some kind of rough patches, a little bit of like bump and height detail, but not too bad. Let's try a different one. So let's drag the leather bag material over here. Now you notice that I've dragged a new material and I'm not seeing it in the viewer. It's because the layer order is very important. Let's move the layer of the leather bag above the artificial leather, and you'll now see that this is the one we're currently seeing. So it's very similar to every other layer-based software like Photoshop or After Effects. The layer order is going to determine what layers on top of what. So the leather bag is layering over the artificial leather at the moment. And all I'm looking for is which one of these guys would be a good starting point. This one has some cool details. Let's keep going here. We've got leather big grain. This one looks a little cleaner, but it has some probably better... this one has better like bump and cell details. We could perhaps use that. And what else we got here? Medium grain, probably smaller. Leather rough, that's probably not going to work out too well. A little too small. Artificial. Let me go get the artificial one real quick. I want to compare that sci-fi artificial to the other one. They're probably very similar. They are extremely similar. So there's not much difference between these two guys right here. I think what we're going to do is let's just start with artificial leather and then we'll modify that. So the first thing is let's change the color. Now this has been a little buggy for me recently, and I think it has something to do with my dual screen setup with my laptop. But instead of us kind of clicking on the material and scrolling down, and we'll talk about the transform settings here in a little bit, but if I just kind of hop down below, you'll notice there are color, height, roughness, and metal. Our color is right here. Now if I turn color on and off, watch this area. See how it disappears? There's no color. It's just defaulting to white, which is its backup plan. Let's turn color back on. So the color is where we need to pull that leather color. So I'm going to go back here. Let's just kind of scale this in a little bit. Kind of like that. And we are going to click on the color box, click and hold on the eyedropper, and then drag this over the leather. And you can kind of see we will eventually get something that's a pretty good match. Like let's do that right about there. That looks pretty good. Of course, you can modify the hue saturation value as you need, just in case you have an issue and it's not the color. All right. Now, a couple other things we need to do here is, now that we have the color established, is we need to make sure the leather is even visible in the right areas. And you can see it is clearly not in the right area. It's covering everything. So Painter doesn't understand what part is leather, because the material is going to layer on the entire object, all the UVs. Now let me get rid of this empty layer here. We're just going to select it and delete it. I'm now going to make a folder. So think of this like a group. And I'm really big about keeping things organized, especially when you're in something like Painter, where you're going to potentially have, at least 20, 30 layers of textures kind of combining together. It's super critical to keep the stuff named and organized so you can troubleshoot it easier. So everything in this folder is going to be specifically for the leather, not the other parts. So we're going to call this leather group. And then I'm going to drag this material in the group. And you'll see it kind of pops. There we go. So I can now collapse this group as I, when I'm done with it. I can turn the whole group on and off if I'm, I don't want to see it. Now the group is also nice because I can then set up a mask to tell the leather where it should not be visible. So to do this, we're going to click on the group, go to the second button in on the top, and we're going to pick Add a Black Mask. Now, masking is probably something that some of you guys have used before, especially if you've ever used Photoshop or maybe Nuke. But it's very common in a lot of softwares. But masking, essentially you can think of it kind of like an alpha. White is visible, black is not visible. So when I make a black mask on the group, I'm saying that everything within this group currently is not visible. When I paint white, it will make areas become visible. So I'm starting with nothing. We're going to add detail to that. Now, once I have the mask selected, I'm going to add an effect to it. Now, you want to be kind of careful about this because when you're on a layer, keep track of which one of these two boxes you're selecting. This is the color. This is a mask or an alpha. They're different, and depending on what one you have selected will kind of cause this whole section to react differently. So I'm going to make sure I'm selecting the mask of the group. Go up here, and we're going to add paint. Now, when you add a paint effect to the mask, you can kind of think of this like a paint layer where you're basically just going to be painting some type of color on the surface. So as a really quick example, you can see that as soon as I've clicked on this, see how when I click off, these are disabled, but when I go back to that paint layer, the brush tool is working. So it's ready for me to paint something. Now, there are a lot of brush settings that we're going to get into a lot more detail with later on, but let's just kind of scroll down a little bit. And way at the bottom, you can see it currently says we're painting the color white, or 1. Now, the brush looks like it's a white color, and I could go up here and scale it, play around with the size and flow. Also some controls up here, but watch what happens if I paint white. Notice how the leather is becoming visible everywhere I paint white. Okay, let's hit undo. Let's back up. So this means we just need to simply paint white on the two areas right here because that represents all the leather parts of the book. Those 3 sections above that are going to be the side of the book where we're going to have the pages. So instead of me hand painting this with a bigger brush, which is too much work, instead we're going to go down a little bit to this thing called the polygon fill. We're going to click on that. And then we have a couple options here. Triangle, polygon, by mesh, or UV chunk. These two here are not too useful at this current for this marquee drag. It'll try to apply alphas based on your polygons. I don't really like that a whole lot. So what I'm going to do instead is do by UV chunk. And UV chunk just means it's applying it based on UV shell. So if I just make sure the color is white and then simply click on those 2 shells, you'll notice that leather is now visible on those because we painted white. You can even see it there in the little preview. The other areas are still black, so there's no leather on the side of the book. Okay, let's try this again, and let's just try to knock out the pages really quick. So I'm just going to make a new group immediately. And the layer order is not going to be too important for this because those 2 areas don't really overlap. But we're going to call this pages group. And let's kind of see if we can find something. So pages, nothing. Okay, maybe paper. Okay, we can see we've run into a little bit of an issue. So obviously there aren't going to be presets for every single material out there. You probably could find something online, but there are ways to manipulate these to get a really good result. And I'll show you for wood. Now we only have 3 wood materials: American cherry, wood rough, and then we have a walnut. I'm going to use the wood rough because you can at least see, like, texturally, even though it still looks like wood, that does kind of feel like it has that same grittiness I'm getting in the reference, and I can fix the color later. So we're going to drag this wood rough material to the other group. Okay, so it's now inside of that, and just give that a minute. And it should update. There we go. Okay, so I now have this wood rough material on there. But again, you can see because my group is above the leather, it's covering everything. Let's immediately set up the mask to fix that, just like we did earlier. So I'm going to click on this group right here. We're going to go to Mask, add a black mask on the group. Okay, it's gone because it's black. With the mask selected, let's go to the Effects, add Paint, and we're already on the polygon fill. It's already set to UV chunk. It's white, which is perfect. We're just going to click on those 3 pieces right there. 1, 2, 3. And now you can see that rough wood material is assigned to those areas. Okay? So let's now go back to the group and out of the mask. And you can kind of see what we're currently getting. Now this does look like wood. We're going for pages, right? But if we go to the material, watch what happens if I go up here to this transform area that I was kind of showing you a little earlier. We have a scale, and if at the moment if I move this up and down, it looks like it's scaling the material uniformly. So it's a lot smaller, a lot bigger if we go down. And it's doing this because the U and V scale, horizontal and vertical, are locked because of this padlock. We're going to turn this off so U and V are now independent. Watch what happens if I make the vertical scale higher. So let's crank this up a little bit. Look what's happening to the side of this. So what we're doing is we're basically making this wood material repeat. So if I go to like a value of 10, it's repeating 10 times, which is squashing it a lot. And visually, it looks like those lines in the wood are starting to form the pages of a book. And if I go like a lot higher, they'll become thinner and thinner. So it's kind of just a balancing game of figuring out visually, you know, where does it feel about right. So that's a little scale trick where we're able to turn another preset into something that we need. Let's also fix the color really quick. Maybe this time instead of color match, that's a lot closer. So we're just going to bring that in, pop this up. Okay, so to match the color without the color picker, I need to be lighter. I'm kind of watching the viewer. I definitely need more saturation. Okay, let that update. It's a little slow for me because of the recording. Okay, too much yellow, so let's bring the hue down into warmer tones. Oh, look how close we got. A little saturated still, so I might, even though it does look kind of rich, that just feels a little odd in here. So I think I'm going to pull this saturation back just a little more. Something like that. Looks pretty good. Not bad though, right? And we did that without color picking this time. Alright, so you can see here in this video, we've got some material presets assigned. We use the polygon fill with a simple mask and paint effect to control where those materials are visible. And in the next video, we are going to do the same thing with the fabric and the gold trim on the top. Basically the same idea, but we're going to have to do a couple new tricks with the paintbrush to get that part to work properly.